All right, good evening. This is Jim Howard. Jessica Howard's online with us. We're going to be talking about non-church events on church property. Just a recent event that happened in California. We'll get into that in a minute because there's a lot of information to cover on that. So I'm glad you came out tonight. I'm going to let Jessica start us off. I think we've got some current events.
Yes,
So
sorry. Okay, so we have some current events, and these get sent out every Sunday in our current events email that we send out. And so the first thing that we wanted to talk about was there was just this incident where he was a college professor, university professor, and a church safety team member was arrested for having child pornography on his phone. I believe that's what, or sexual assault. And so we're obviously still getting more about that, and we'll put that out in the report on Sunday. And so that was just important because this is a church safety team member. I'm looking at his charges now. He had 11 counts of child sexually abuse activity. He had 11 counts of using a computer to commit crime and 1 count of accosting a child for immoral purposes. So obviously a lot of charges against him, and he was on the safety team. And so that's also something, talk a lot about pastors. And so just remember that it's also very important who is on your safety team, and just to kind of keep an eye on that as well. Another incident that I wanted to bring up is there was another arson at a church. I keep seeing more and more arsons at churches. So that's just something to kind of keep in mind. For perimeter security, maybe make sure you have cameras or some sort of deterrent against that. One thing new that I did see in the current event so far was that a man damaged a church's heating unit. So their heating and cooling unit was outside of their church, and security footage caught him walking up to the unit and just taking different parts from it. And so obviously the church had to repair that. I had never seen an instance where that happened. So if your church's heating or cooling units are outside, that might be something to consider, maybe finding a way to kind of hide those better. This church's ones, from what I saw from the video, were behind a couple shrubs, but they were easily accessible. So maybe consider more deterrence there. There was one case in Orlando, so close to home for us, where a registered sex offender recorded videos of boys in the bathroom of a church in Orlando. And so we had a training, I want to say a couple months ago, that was about cameras in bathrooms, but I believe from reading the report that this man just took pictures of kids in bathrooms. And so obviously, I know we've talked about maybe having the kid zone bathrooms only for kids and not allow adults in. And so that might be something that your church might want to consider, just to keep the kids safe. Another one that I wanted to bring up was there was a statue in front of a Catholic church almost stolen. We talk a lot about statues being stolen, but the suspect took the statue and was carrying away. But a neighbor had a automatic light system outside of their house, a motion detector light, that spooked the suspect. And so he actually ran back through the statue, back down, and then ran away, and they caught it all on camera. So just to show how motion sensor lights can actually work. And so maybe consider that on your church property if you don't have them. Two more things really quick. There was a church that received not only hate mail, but also vandalism. So I know we've talked a lot about what to do if your church receives threats. Those include written down on paper threats in forms of hate mail. Just something to consider. We have seen that. And then lastly, there was a Vancouver Russian community center that was vandalized, and there was also a church, a Russian Orthodox church in Canada, that was vandalized. And so I don't think that we have any Russian Orthodox churches here, but if there are some in your neighborhood, maybe reach out to them, because there have been instances where either people have appeared outside of the Russian Orthodox churches and vandalized them, or like in these cases in Canada, they actually just dump blue and yellow paint on the doors and the walls because of everything going on right now. So that's just something to consider about how these kind of global events can impact churches back here. So that's what we have for the current events so far.
all right, thanks, Jess. I appreciate it. Okay. I was really disturbed when I saw this next thing that we're getting ready to talk about. I did want to go back one thing real quick before we get started and just say something about the guy that was a professor that was also a church safety team member. Listen, I took a little bit of a look at that, and I could do a whole 30 minutes on that. Just because you're on a safety team of a church does not make you, perfect. But also we have to understand that um, you really need to be paying attention to the person, their social media, anything that they may have said that would cause you concern, some statement they may made about a child or something like this, because this guy, from the preliminary reports I was reading, he was going to meet up with a 15-year-old to have sex. He got caught in a sting. And then, of course, when they did the search warrant, they found the pornography and different things like that, the children pornography. So these are things that I keep saying this over and over and over again. If you're the safety team leader, you need to really be paying attention to who is on your team. And so we just stress this over and over and over again. And this is just going to be one of these that we will be talking about for a while. But let's get on to what we were going to talk about tonight. We when I saw this headline, I was just devastated. I mean, I really was. I can't even imagine this. And of course, when we went out and started to, get the information on this, it was just so sad. It was terribly sad. So what we do know, and this is one of the reasons why we're going to be talking about this, is that we had a situation where a guy had supervised visitation with his children, and he went to the church where they had set up a planned meeting, and he went inside and he killed his three daughters, and then he shot and killed the guy that was being there, that was helping out, that was doing the kind of like the mediator. I mean, he wasn't even involved in this, except that he had been asked to kind of not really supervise it, but just to be around it. So, when we have situations like this, it's very, first off, it's just, I can't even imagine what happened with the church. I mean, this is just something that you can't imagine is going to happen in a million years, and then it does. And there's a whole bunch of red flags in this. And this is what bothers me more than anything else, is the red flags that happen here. This guy was a violent guy. The father was a violent guy. One of the reasons why his wife had left him was because of his violence. For some strange reason, the courts did not give her, and like I said, I've been trying to do some research on this and looking at it and different things like that. But for some strange reasons, the court did not give her an injunction against him, which to me, I think would have been the first thing that would have happened. I like I said, when I read things like this, there's so many different red flags that it just bothers me to no end. But it's the sign of the times. And the thing that we have to look at is that when you have outside activities that are happening inside your church, you really need to be paying attention to it. And I'm going to say this right now. I mean, our church is finally stepping up to the plate and doing this. But of course, this is because our church has multiple schools. We're going to have 3 by the fall. And, we're looking at having security on campus, paid security. And this is something that churches need to really be analyzing what's going on in their church and starting to look at whether or not they really need to bring in paid security to be in the church. And I'm talking about, this has got to be a part of your church ministry. This cannot be where you go out and hire people, or you have some outside organization come in and do your church safety or security. This has to be within the church, somebody that that could take over. Now, like I said, the church is going to be looking at using me. So the thing when I first saw this, it reminded me of how we truly got started at Generations Christian Church, or it was First Christian during that time frame. We we had a safety team, but we were watching money. We were watching money because we were taking large amounts of money for the property we just purchased, and it was a building fund drop. And so they asked us to kind of like watch the money. And during this time frame, we had a guy, the same exact thing, that had supervised visitation with his children, but he was circumventing that when he would come on the church property. And so we found out about it. We requested the court order so that we could take a look at it. And before we could get the court order, he threatened his ex-in-laws, and we spoke to him, and he was escorted off the property. And then like the week later, Pasco County Sheriff's Office showed up at our church and said, hey, this guy is a person of interest in a murder case. So apparently that afternoon, after he was so upset with us, he went home and killed his landlord. So this happens more than we really know about it. And we need to be gathering our own intelligence inside the church when these things happen. If you get an injunction or if you get a protective order, something like that, one of your members gets that person that the protective order or injunction is against cannot come on your property. And if they do come on your property, you need to notify law enforcement immediately. But in this situation right here, this was not on a church function. This was something that happened on a weekday, and it just put so many people. I mean, this is just, like I said, I can't even imagine this because of what happened. And so his girls were ages 13, 10, and 9. And then Nathaniel Kong was the church volunteer that said he would stick around. And, you know, he was 59 years old and was shot and killed along with the 3 girls. And then, of course, the gunman turned the gun on himself. But, you know, there was, you know, his girlfriend, the children's mother said, you know, I'm scared, I'm nervous, I'm afraid of him. You know, I don't want him to return home. This was a girlfriend. This wasn't even his ex-wife. So, you know, there was a lot of verbal and physical abuse. You know, like I said, just so much had been going on. So when we had these functions, I mean, we're opening it up and we're getting ready to have a lit soccer field. And I don't know whether you've been to a soccer game with some of these parent soccer games, but they get downright nasty in these games. And we have seen situations of where parents have attended sporting events to where there's been fights and parents have been killed. There was a hockey event that happened where a guy was hit with a stick, fell and hit his head. There was a baseball game where a parent hit another parent with a baseball bat. So when we have these type of things that are going on at our churches, we need to start looking at this, because what I fear more than anything else is that if an event happens on your church property, that you could be, you could be sued because you did not provide some sort of safety or security for your church, especially in these events. So I listen, it's a litigious world. Everybody's suing everybody. We're very sue happy. So it's one of these situations where we have to start paying attention to what is going on our church property all through the week. More and more churches are having things on their property, not just Sunday morning. I mean, we have our Baptist churches with that, which have they have services on Wednesday night. We have our youth ministry on Wednesday night, and we just had Pasco County called to our church because of an incident that happened on our church. So we're not immune to it either. We have these situations that are popping up everywhere, and we as safety team members need to be, standing on somebody's desk and screaming about these things and showing them this is what happens when we allow the church. And listen, I understand the church wanting to help out. I don't know whether the mother of these children went to this church or anything like that. I don't know why this church was picked as a rendezvous point. But the thing that I do know is that when situations like this arise, there needs to be more information gathered than just, sure, let's do it. Let's help them out. If this person is an abusive person, it shouldn't be done on the church. Let me just say it this way. I believe in Florida, and if anybody knows anything different, correct me if I'm wrong, but it has to be at a state certified place and not a church. Now, I will tell you that parents do use churches to, give kids over to the spouse or to the other one that has visitation. And in Bel Air, we saw many situations where those transfers of children were downright violent. We had one lady that got a GoPro that was accusing her husband of hitting her at different times, and he went and got a GoPro, and it saved him because she ran at him one night, missed him, and hit a tree, and she was injured. But she went and called Largo Police Department and said that he had struck her. Largo goes over to talk to him because they think that they have a domestic violence issue, and he shows the video and shows where she ran at him, and he just ducked her, and she hit a tree. So when we have anything that is not church related that is happening at our church, we need to be talking about some sort of safety. And so I just think it's very important that we realize this. We keep seeing incidents like this. This isn't the first time this has happened. My own testimony is that my father stepped outside of the church, but of course we had church that night, but shot and killed a deacon that was helping my parents out in reference to divorce. And it was just, that's what kind of started my life. So these things are happening. You need to be talking to your ministers. You need to be talking to your leaders of the church, and you need to be telling them that if somebody asks us to do something like this, you need to get a lot of information, because this guy apparently had been in a lot of trouble with law. He was not supposed to be having a gun. He bought what they called a ghost gun. And what that means is somebody built it at his house, but he should have never had the gun also. So like I said, so many different things that just, cause me concern when I read these. And, I'm sitting here looking at one of the articles, and it says a 5-year order was imposed May 19th. It stipulated the shooter only have supervised visits with his daughters for up to 4 hours per week with a mutually agreed upon chaperone. So what that tells me is he probably knew the chaperone that he shot and killed also. He was also required to take an anger management course. When I read things like that, I'm like, did we know this? Did we know this? And if we did, why didn't we take extra precautions for it? So we're just, as I'm reading this, it says our church body is devastated. Of course they are. I mean, 3 children were killed. And so, we have to be really starting to pay attention to what is going on our campuses. Sports, Celebrate Recovery. When we started our Celebrate Recovery at our church, now we don't do it anymore, but when we started it, they didn't come and talk to us when they started it. And I was just waiting because I knew something was going to happen. So sure enough, one of the ministry leaders came to me and said, "Hey, I'm curious, what should we do if somebody comes into our church armed?" And I said, "Really? You're now coming to me and talking to me? This wasn't a question that you had earlier?" And, it was like, well, we think one of the guys brought in a gun one time, and we tell them right off the bat, no guns, no guns. And I said, well, do you say no weapons? And they were like, well, why would we say that? No guns, I said, because I can tell you right now, those that don't have guns probably have knives. And we've seen current event after current event after current event. There was just a pastor stabbed multiple times in his driveway. It wasn't on church property, but at his house, where a guy walked up and says, "Can I talk to you?" And he started to stab the pastor. So there's the knives, or, when you say, oh, we just say no guns in the church. No, it should be no weapons, especially in events like Celebrate Recovery, feeding the poor. I've talked to so many different churches that tell me that when they're feeding the homeless, that a lot of times there's fights because people cut in line, or people feel like that the other person got one more chicken leg than the other person did. I mean, there's all these type of things. And if you get somebody hurt on your property and you have not taken the necessary precautions to secure them, I'm warning you right now, you're going to see an attorney in a couple of days. And this situation right here, Nathaniel Kong, who was known at the church, was a member of the church. I'm wondering what his family is going to be doing. And I'm sorry if I have to be this blunt about it, but those are the things that concern me, that we're not paying attention. This world has just gotten really strange. And I can tell you over the past month at our church, we've had 3 separate incidences where we're like, how did this happen? But my one of the my executive pastor, I was standing there telling him about the incident where Pasco County showed up because of something that had happened. And I'll talk about that later on, but I'm not going to talk about it tonight because there's still a lot of information going on. But an incident happened in our church that Pasco County showed up the very next day to talk to some of the people that were at our youth services. And as I was telling the pastor about it, he was almost deflated because he felt like that here, we take 2 steps forward and it seems like we get 3 steps back. And I said, no, I said, you need to look at it a different way. That if your church is doing something in the community, Satan is going to attack you like nobody's business. I would like to go back and read more on the church where this guy was arrested for the child pornography to see where this church is in the community and see if it isn't a church that is really growing inside the community, because this is the type of thing that Satan wants to do to destroy the churches that are really on fire for Christ and expanding the kingdom of God. So if all of a sudden you start to see things that you're like shaking your head, like what happened? Satan is coming at us hard right now. And we see it everywhere. We talk about it all the time. So just be prepared because it's not going to get better. It is going to get worse. And I hate to be the pessimistic person about it, but I'm not talking about this thing right here is one of those of where we look at it and we go, oh my gosh, an active shooter. Not really. I'm not going to call it an active shooter. You can call it that if you want to, because of the definition of it. But this was a domestic issue. This was not somebody that walked in to kill people at the church. He walked in to kill his own children just to get, just because of who this person was. He was broken. He was mentally ill. I mean, I just don't know why. I've seen the pictures of these 3 girls. They were beautiful little girls. I cannot imagine anybody doing that. So I know that there's evil inside that person's mind. The devil is right there. We don't want to talk about demons. We all get a little uncomfortable when we talk about it. But to me, that was just plain and simple evil. That's just all there is to it. So we need to start making sure that we're getting ready for the onslaught that's going to be coming at our churches. And I don't want this to be gloom and doom. I really don't. But predators are visiting our churches. People seeking, when I say predators, I'm talking about guys that come to your church seeking what they call a good woman because they're trying to change their life, but they don't want to be alone. So they think that the church is where they can meet a good woman that might straighten them out. Well, that's not what the church is for. The church is not a meeting place. It's not a dating site. So these dating sites that are Christian dating sites, I think that they hurt the church more than anything else, because really, if you're truly trusting in God, if God has a person for you, God will provide that person for you. So we have to be ready for what is going to happen. We have to be ready. This church was devastated because of what happened. And it's just sad that we have to be talking about it tonight. It really is. I'm just devastated. Like I said, when I read this, it just broke my heart, because you know me and you know that I had 2 girls and I could never hurt my 2 girls. So I just feel for the family. I feel for those that are involved. I feel for the church. And we just need to make sure that we're paying attention to who's coming inside our churches. So that's kind of it. I want to open it up for comments, suggestions, questions.
I don't see anything in the chat, but I would just like to add, just from some current events that I know I've seen a lot. I've seen a lot of late night Bible studies, which are church events on campus, but getting out of church late at night, especially if your church is in a bad neighborhood, people walking home late at night, getting mugged on the way home. And that goes back into kind of crime statistics. And I've also seen a lot of cases where a drug deal has gone bad on a church campus. So if you know that there's some suspicious activity on your church, maybe call law enforcement or get them involved. And then the other thing that I wanted to add too is we also have, it's not every day that I see it, but I do see it about every other week, is sexual assaults that happen on church properties just at night. People walking by, they think it's a safe place, so they're hanging out there. And things like that happen. And then the last thing is we see a lot of homeless people in churches as well. So that's also something to consider, especially if your church is near a bus stop or just somewhere like a community center, or like Dad was saying, if you have CR or any homeless programs on your church. I've seen a lot, especially if it gets cold, where they'll break into the church property or OD on church property. So that's also just some things to think about. And then it looks like John Perone just said in the chat, he just said incident reports with an exclamation point.
Well, I talked about this a couple of weeks ago, and John, you're right. The church needs to be doing incident reports if something happens on their property. And that could be just as simple as just doing an email as date, time, and this is what happened. It should be stored somewhere so it can be recovered later on. But also looking at the incident reports that are happening, the crime that's happening in your area. I work with a church over in Lakeland, and they've asked for me to do just that, to watch for crimes that happen in their location. And just the other day, I saw a vehicle burglary. And even though you might think, well, what does this have to do with the church? Well, if your church people are leaving their vehicles open and you don't have somebody in the parking lot, somebody might go and break into their vehicle. So these are happening. And when they're close by, it's one of those that we really have to be paying attention to the crime in the area. So I just say that over and over and over again. So, but yeah, incident reports, the incident reports that are happening in your location, and then of course making sure that you're doing an incident report. So, anybody else? Any other questions?
Douglas Lines has his hand up, but I'm not sure.
Doug, did you have a question?
I reached out to him in the chat, so I'll let you know if he's able to type it up.
Okay. Doug, is there something you needed to talk about? Or do you not know how to?
And there are no hands up anymore.
Okay. All right. All right. So a couple of things we can talk about. We've got some training coming up. And this training is the ones that we're going to show you is open to everybody. So we'll get into that. We have West Coast Church. Hang on one sec. In Inglewood, Florida, down south. That's going to be on the 19th of this month. And I really need to have the times, don't I? But if you want more information, it's right out there on our website. We're looking forward to that. We're also going to Faith Baptist Church. That's here in Pasco County. We're going to be doing a what if study there. That's one of the new studies that we've been doing. At Inglewood, we're going to be talking about why to do a safety team. And then we're going to be doing threat profiling of what to look for when people come in. And then we're also going to be doing some current events. We're going to try to pack. It's a whole day. We're going to try to pack as much as we possibly can. On 4/26, we're going to be in Vine Life out in Hernando. And this will be a church safety meeting that we'll be just going out there and really to be announced of what we're going to be talking about during that time frame. We're trying really hard to build up the Hernando area. So if you know churches out in that area, please have them pull this up and show come, because we really want to have some sort of a networking out there in that area. Our members only Zoom is going to be March the 17th. So we're really excited about that. Get y'all out here. And we're going to be talking about whatever current events that's happening in your area or what you want to be doing or some of the things that you have happening. Easter's on its way. It's around the corner. And this is one of the things that we really need to start thinking about, because we're going to have multiple services. Our churches are going to be packed. And, the Creasters are going to come out, those that come to church on Christmas and Easter. And I know that we're got 5 services that we're going to be doing. So maybe more, but we need to start preparing for that because it's long days for our safety teams, but it's also very rewarding. It really is. I mean, I love Christmas and I love Easter, but we always have to be on alert because it is our special holidays, and Satan would love nothing less to hurt a church during those time frames. And we do see where it happens overseas. So we have to be ready for anything that might come our way. I saw a chat. Did you have something, Jess?
Yes, so Douglas Line said, address the constant problem of safety team members wanting to help when we know the person is either mentally ill or a threat and the church doesn't want to address the issue. And then John just said, I'm off, have a blessed night, and thank you for all you do.
Doug, you're absolutely right. There's a lot of issues of mental health that happens in the church. Kind of sad that you're saying that the church doesn't want to do anything. I'd like to talk more maybe offline with what we kind of do with these things and how we look at it. We try to find out what is happening, and then there's usually a person there that is a guardian or something, some person in that type of position, and we would talk to them also because, I mean, we've had that happen. We've had them come into our church, bring those that are mentally handicapped, and kind of lose sight of them, and the next thing you know, they're disrupting the church service. So we have had those things happen. So that's really, like I said, we can talk more about that. You're absolutely right. Anybody else?
Not that I'm seeing, no.
Okay. I want to talk a little bit about USCCA just for a second. USCCA and Trinity Security Allies have partnered up, and they are starting to help us be able to do more trainings anywhere in the United States, And Dave Johnson, I saw you cold, I guess that's Northeast Ohio. If you have a church up there that would like to have some training done because of our partnership with the USCCA, get in touch with Wendy and let's talk about it, because they're really helping us get the word out. They believe in what we're doing. They want to help us be able to get to more churches. And all it is they come in, they help sponsor it, and then they do a 20-minute, 25-minute presentation about USCCA, and then they turn it over to us. So if you know of anybody in any church that at one time thought that they couldn't afford for us to come up and do training, let's get together and talk. Contact Wendy and let's talk about it.
Dave Johnson just said, okay, thanks. And James Henkel said, NRA is your answer.
NRA is your answer.
I think that was when the USCCA slide was up, and I'm not sure.
Okay. NRA and USCCA are two different animals. Let's make sure that we're perfectly clear here. USCCA offers you insurance for carrying a weapon. NRA is gun safety. I mean, to the nth degree, training, all those things like that. Don't get me wrong. I belong to both. I'm an NRA instructor, but as far as, and NRA was offering insurance there for a while, but I think that they've moved away from it. And now a lot of times they're recommending USCCA. So, and I want to make sure that I'm absolutely right.
I'm going to pause for a second.
Sure.
James Henkel said NRA equals no one remains anonymous.
No one remains anonymous. Okay. I'm not really for sure where that was going, but I'll have to think of that. All right. Let's finish up. We still have our free resources out there. That is how we find out about a lot of churches that they're looking at our stuff, putting together a safety plan, developing a safety team, carrying weapons in church, and Sunday morning, what to look for. If you've never pulled these down and read them, please do. It's good information. It's a refresher information. it just helps you remember some of the things and some of the reasons why we're doing why we're doing what we're doing. God placed us here, and this is what we do. My book has been doing well. It's all God. I'm grateful for it. But if you would like to get your paperback copy, please, a $20 donation, go to TrinitySecurityAllies.com or God'sUnseenPlan.com. And like I said, it's doing well. I'm just pleased, but like I said, it's all God. Trust me. And one more time, I'd like to talk about True Christian Talk when we have so much going on in the world. And to give you an example, last week we talked about how Time Magazine did an article that said that white Christian nationalists. Now, I'm not really for sure what they mean by nationalist, but they use it as a dirty word. That means somebody that's radical, who loves their country, that may be to the far side. I love my country, and I would maybe consider myself a nationalist, but I'm not on the far right. I'm not the extreme. I believe in peaceful protesting. I don't believe going into the Capitol. I think that was totally wrong. But what these organizations are doing is they're saying that white Christian nationalists are also, they're changing the word to ambassador. So that if you say you're an ambassador for Christ, they're now making it look like you are a white Christian nationalist. Now, they use the term nationalist as a negative term. And so we talk about these things of looking at the world, what is going on in the world through a Christian lens. And the conversation that we had today was on some new information that was brought about maybe voter fraud, which puts, people who want to vote, it kind of like starts to dampen their voting spirit, and they don't want to go and vote because they think that it's all, illegal or there's voting fraud and stuff like that. We got to stop thinking like that. We have to be out here and we have to be paying attention to what is going on in our world. And we have to be doing the Christian thing, love one another as we love ourselves. And so that's what God says as the greatest command is to love our Father with all of our heart, soul, and mind, and love your neighbors, you love yourself. And we have to make sure that we're doing that, but we have to be paying attention to what's going on in the world, because you can be blindsided really easy. Somebody looked at me and says, well, I don't read Time Magazine. Why would I care about what they say? Well, there are other people that are reading Time Magazine, and you would hate to get yourself in a situation of where something happened and you can't figure out what it is, and you're getting blasted in emails and all these things like this. And it's because you use a simple term that said, I'm an ambassador for Christ. That's what you have to look for. That's what they're trying to do. So these are things that we talk about Thursdays at 11 o'clock, but they're out there on YouTube. It's called True Christian Talk. Go out and subscribe. We're at 84. We need 16 more, and we get our own URL, and it gives us a little more weight. So please go out and help us out. And unless there's something else, thank you. Jess, is there anything else out there?
James Henkel just said that it means that it takes the surprise out of any issue, changes the mindset, and that he would be glad to talk. But I think it was back when you were talking about churches dealing with mental health, that question that was brought up earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, like I said, I'll be glad to everybody has my telephone number. If you don't, look, it's all over the web sites. And so you can find me. My email, of course, is jim@trinitysecurityallies.com, jim@trinitysecurityallies.com. And you can always email me, and I'll be more than happy to talk. But mental health in the church, that I think we could do a whole session on that. I really do, because you're absolutely right. It's something that we need to be aware of, and we need to be paying attention to it. But I don't want us to panic on it. There are things out there that we have to be concerned of, but also we have to understand that they are God's children, just like we are, and they deserve the love just like we do. So if there's nothing else, y'all have a great night. God bless you. God bless this country. Be safe. And we'll talk to you again next week. Good night.